I've created a class called Simple Bank, and in our Simple Bank, we're going to have a bank balance. So set it to any arbitrary value, 374 Rand 28, which is a double. And with doubles being a primitive data type, it's easy to print out the value of the double. You can use system.out.println line. I could precede it with an R followed by the value of the double, like so. Let's run it. There we go, it's printed out the double. But as our program begins to grow in complexity, we might replace using a double to represent an account to using a class. So in this case, I've created a class called account, and now rather than just being a number, an account has details about who the account holder is, whether it's a check account or a savings account. It has an account number, and it does still have the double, which is the balance. Completeness, I've also added a constructor so we can set those values, and I've added in a withdraw and a deposit method. Let's return to our bank. This time it's not a simple bank, it's a more advanced bank, and it contains more advanced information about their accounts. In other words, they're going to use the account class to represent its banks rather than double primitive data type. Let's create an account. Here I've created an account which I've descriptively named A's0001, and I've set up the account holder. It's a check account. I've given an account number and an opening balance. And we can create multiple accounts. I've set up some extra accounts, so now I've got 5 accounts that we can play with. But unlike before, if I try to print out one of these accounts, if I say system.out.println and I print out account AAA0001, this account is no longer just a simple number. When I say print it out to this area down the bottom, what should it print out? Should it now print out the balance? Should it print out the account holder? Should it print out whether it's a check account or not? Or should it print out some more complicated piece of text representing all those things? And by default, the answer might not be what you expect. If I run that, it instead prints out the name of the package of my class, which you can see here at the top says package tostring. Then it prints out the class name, which in my case, each of these things is an account, or in this case, A0001 is an account, and then @ and some funny symbols, some alphanumeric code. We'll talk later about where this default behavior comes from when you're trying to print a complicated object as text. But I first want to talk about how do we override this behavior and get it to do something to print out what we want it to print. So let's go back to our account class. Add a very special method. This method is also going to be public. It's not going to return nothing. It's going to return a string representation of our class, the way we want it to be represented. And the method has to be called tostring with a small t, capital S, brackets, and then we can put our code inside there. So let's say we wanted to represent the object as the account holder, followed by a space, followed by the bank balance. And I now return this string representation of my account to anybody who calls my tostring method. And now if we head back to the bank class, in my system.print line, I'm going to call, instead of printing out the object directly, I'm going to call the tostring method. And let's see what gets printed out at the bottom there. That looks better. So now it's printing out the account holder and the bank balance. But something more interesting happened. If I didn't edit this, and I didn't call the tostring method, and I run this, somehow magically it knew to use the tostring method anyway. Before I continue, I have to fix something that's bothering me, and that's, I feel that we should have an R in front of our bank balance. So I'm going to bring back across account class, and I'm going to add an R in front of the balance. This also puts some more space between the account holder and the balance. So instead of a space, I'm going to use a tab character, which is \T. Save that. Come back to our bank and our account. That looks better. Explaining why we don't need to call the tostring method, directly call it, is going to require us to jump ahead a little bit in the syllabus. I'm going to comment out the tostring method we just wrote and go back to the default. If I print out the object, if you remember, it printed out the package, the class, and some alphanumeric code. We're going to go back to where does this come from. Another interesting, unexpected behavior is that if I type my account name and I press dot, I can still find in this list that drops down the tostring method, even though I've commented it out. And not only the tostring method, there's a whole bunch of other methods that are available, not just the ones that I've written, like withdraw and deposit. The makers of Java wrote the very first class in Java, and that class is called the object class. Now, I don't have the exact code that's written inside that class, but I can see part of it. If I look in the object.java file, I can see that it's part of a specific package, and there you can see the public class object. It has a constructor that does, we don't know, because we're not allowed to see the code inside of here. And it has methods, including a tostring method somewhere in here. If I search for it, tostring, let's keep looking. Okay. We can find in that class a tostring method, and that tostring method returns, it calls other methods inside the same class, and these two methods will give us the package name followed by the class name. Then it gives us an @ symbol, and then it gives some hexadecimal string. Now if you remember, that looks a lot like what we're seeing here when we try to print out an account. But we didn't use the class object, we used the class account. So how did my account get methods that were written in a different class? Let's go back to our account class. Java uses something called inheritance. By default, when I create a class in Java, that class automatically inherits from the object class. To do it explicitly, we would say it extends the object class. So you can read, whenever you see this word extends, you can read it as is a. In other words, an account is an object. And because the account is an object, it has all the things an object has. And remember, one of the things the object had is a tostring method. So because the account is an object, the account also has a tostring method. It inherited it from its parent, from the object class. So remembering that I've commented out my custom tostring method, and that an account is an object, and so an account has inherited the tostring method from the object class. If I go back to my bank and I print out the account's tostring representation, it then makes sense that it would print out what the object class returns, because the account inherited this tostring method from the object class. And now going back to the account class, if I uncomment my custom tostring method, what I'm in fact doing is remembering that the account inherited the tostring method from the object, is I am now overriding that inherited tostring object. I'm forgetting it, and I'm saying rather do whatever this says, whatever I want it to do. So I've inherited everything from the object class, not only the tostring method, but all the other methods written in the object class, and I've overridden just the tostring method. So that in my bank class, now when I call my account.tostring, because it's an account, when I call the tostring, it calls my custom one, the overridden version of the original tostring method inherited from the object class. And so finally, how did the print line method, also written by the makers of Java, how did they make it work that you don't even need to call the tostring method directly, and that will still, if I run it, know to call my tostring method? I'm going to hold Control and click on the print line function. It'll take me to the source code of that function. And you can see that print line method isn't expecting an account. It's expecting an object to be passed in as a parameter. And if you remember, that's okay, because, now moving on to the account class, said that an account is an object. So if an account is an object, then it makes sense that I should be able to pass it into the print line method, because it expects an object, and an account is an object. And the writers of the print line method also knew, that an object has a tostring method, and an account is an object, and an account has a tostring method. So knowing that all objects have a tostring method, whether you've overridden it or not, they knew they could call the tostring method when they're printing out an object to the screen. And so finally, we go back to our bank and back to our account, and putting it all together. When I print out the account, the print line method knows that an account is an object and that we're passing in an object here. And this specific object, this account object, has overridden the tostring method. It's got its own version of the tostring method. And so when the tostring method is called, it calls the correct version.